I love music from all around the world, of all kinds. Music that's notated, music that's improvised, music that's like ancient or brand new or modern. I'm very, very interested in sound and how people have sculpted it. And so when you ask about the American tradition, I think really much more globally, partly because I travel a lot all around the world and my works are played in different cities and different places and different environments. And these days with the internet and modern airplanes, really we are living in an interdependent world. And so, yes, I do feel like an American composer, for sure. I live in Chicago, in the middle of the country, and I have grown up in America. Yet I wouldn't want to just limit any composer to one kind of box. I think I'm too open-minded for boxes. For me, one of the great traditions of all of music of all times, from any culture, is jazz, and American jazz. And I've been listening to jazz for 45 years. I listen to it every day. I grew up playing trumpet all the way through college, so I was playing in a jazz band. And when I was a young child, my favorite thing to do was to listen to Louis Armstrong and Ella Fitzgerald. I completely idolized them. I still do. They're heroes of mine, and many others, of course, as well. But being a trumpet player, I used to play along with Louis Armstrong and scat along with Ella. And, and then sometimes they were together, of course, and it was just so much fun. And so there's a certain kind of American jazz tradition and big band. I love big band. And I feel that very much coming through in my work, even though in my own work it might sound more like Stravinsky or something on that side of things. Yet on the other hand, the kind of large chords, like extended dominants with ninths and 11ths and 13ths, these kind of really awesome jazz chords are all over my music. So it's hard to separate the rivers of different traditions of music. And I think that's great. In addition to all the jazz artists that I love, Louis and Ella and many, many others, I am very influenced by Bach. Johann Sebastian Bach is my favorite composer. I listen to his work every single day. I've done that for 45 years. I love his invention, his sense of material, his sense of form, a deep spirituality in his sound, incredibly beautiful counterpoint, rhythmic impulse, rhythmic syntax shifts, imagination. It's just, for me, absolutely fabulous music. And even though my music doesn't sound anything like Bach, the sense of building things carefully and the structure and the craft of sound, you would have to know that I've been listening to Bach for 45 years. And then, of course, I love Debussy. I love Chopin and Ravel and Mahler. Mahler. And I love late Beethoven, although I like all Beethoven. I like early Stravinsky, although I like all Stravinsky. And the list goes on and on and on. In my life, there are so many different composition teachers, many of whom I've never met. Earlier, I spoke about Johann Sebastian Bach, or Debussy, or Chopin. These are scores I've studied immensely. But there are many other kinds of composition teachers. For instance, I think one of the best composition teachers is nature. Like, how did that tree grow up? And like the branch goes this way, and then the beautiful sort of balance or form or invention, or like all the different kinds of birds there are with all different colors and feathers and sizes and shapes, or the way the leaves have fallen on the path, and what kind of composition that is making. I love that. So it's very, very beautiful to try to look, when you spend your whole life making sound, you start to see things in all kinds of places, including poetry, for instance. Reading a beautiful poem by Wallace Stevens, or a short, very powerful poem, which is like a nugget from Emily Dickinson, or the kind of fanciful free use of line and word and punctuation of Cummings. which leaves lots of arrows going off in different directions. So I think the poets are very wise people, and they see things in a very deep and beautiful way. I was just thinking of Mark Strand also, for just another poet off the top of my head. So yeah, nature, composers, poetry. I think also a lot about civility and like beauty and the being present. You can find composition teachers all around you if you're just really present in a space or with another artist's words or conception. When I was a very little girl, like 3 and 4, I used to lie underneath the piano in our house and just listen to all the sounds swirl around me. And I remember I used to try to put my fingers when the pedals were going and like try to not get my fingers stuck as the pedals were moving and taking it all in. And I started to make up little tiny songs like plink. And that would be a whole song, in my opinion, as a 4-year-old, or I'd make up like a chord. And I used to spend a lot of time at the piano. And then I was lucky enough to have piano lessons. And my piano teacher said, make something up. Make something up next week. And I would make up like 2 bars and give it a title like Jaybird or something. Just absolutely nothing. But really like understanding sound and thinking about it. And I played piano for 14 years, and I also sang in choir my whole life. And then I took up the trumpet and played trumpet all the way through college. So I was a trumpet performance major, not a composer. So the idea of composing or being a composer was something that was like a natural morph. It wasn't like one day I thought, oh, I'll be a composer. I was writing music in 4th grade, 7th grade, 9th grade, 12th grade. All through high school, I had composition lessons. And then all through college, I also took composition lessons. And then, after 20 years, I morphed into a composer. But it's important to say this because I have such an empathy with the players. I was on their side of the stage from more than the other side of the stage as the composer. And I care a lot about what do their parts look like and how does it feel to play this piece. And can you feel the impulse of the line, and is it beautifully notated? And all these kinds of details are just really, really important. In other words, in short, I'm embodying it. Literally embodying it. I sing all of my music. I stand at the piano and make things up and then jump around and dance and scat and really try to feel what is the sound that I'm going for. I am so excited that the Milwaukee Symphony Orchestra is playing Radiant Circles, and I want to thank every single musician for their individual and their collective expertise, and also my friend Ken, who's conducting, and he's done my works in other cities, and wonderful, wonderful conductor, and just means a lot to me. Now, when you hear the piece, one thing to keep in mind is it's basically an 11-minute crescendo. But it doesn't just go like that. Of course, it has some ebb and some flow and whatnot, and some inner life and some waves of energy. But essentially, it's an 11-minute crescendo. So it starts very, very quietly, literally just with one sound hanging. And it starts to very gradually build up these resonant chords, and then another one. And very spacious, gracious, almost like Debussy, sort of. And little by little, these chords, if you can imagine, they start to coil and sort of get faster and faster until you end up with this huge fanfare at the end. It's a very simple description, but there is a sense of radiant circles, that there's these things that are circling and radiant. But it's always progressing. There's not one material that goes around and around, but it's like a sense of a helix going. So I like writing intense trumpet parts because I was a trumpet player. Sorry, principal trumpet. Can I look in the camera? I'm sorry. But I'm sure that your principal and all of your brass are just going to knock it out of the park. But it is tricky. But I like that, the kind of real virtuosic sound. And there's also a very significant timpani solo. As the piece builds, the timpani starts to really get animated. So at the end, you have kind of a timpani and brass celebration. Ken David, when he was talking to me about it, he was saying for him that the whole piece is like the sunlight this, like, the whole piece is like the sun, and you're like walking closer and closer to the sun as it goes on. You know, it starts very quietly and it just shimmers. And one other thing to mention is it has very little percussion. It has the timpani solo and one other percussionist playing crotals and vibraphone, or like tiny setup. So it's all of this color and sunshine is coming from the actual material and from the orchestra playing it. Lots of my music have lots of percussion in it, so I love percussion, but in this case it's very, very limited and relies heavily on the color shifts and the certain energy shifts of the orchestra.